Hey guys, what's up? It's Alec Torelli from Conscious Poker. In this video, I'm going to talk about the top 10 ways to win at online poker in 2024 in 10 minutes. I'm doing this video because I had a lot of requests after the last video was 4 years old, but it got a lot of views, and I know that really helped a lot of you guys out there. So I'm updating this with what's going on in the current online landscape, and I want to kick this off with where to play. People ask me that all the time about where to play online poker. Well, I'm really excited to announce I am both an ambassador for and an investor in Phenom Poker. And it makes it accessible to play online pretty much from anywhere in the world. Because they use blockchain technology, they are not using banking intermediaries, and therefore it's available in a lot of places in the US as well. So check out joinphenom.com. You can hop on the wait list, or depending on when you're watching this video, join to play immediately. And it's super cool because it's the first site that makes every single player an owner. So you earn rake back in the form of tokens just from playing on the site, and then Phenom distributes 50% of the entire rake of the whole site to the token holders, which is you, me, and everyone. In addition to that, the community members, the token holders, can vote on proposals to govern the future of the site. There's other videos on this channel about Phenom, an interview with the founder, Matt Vallejo, a friend of mine as well. So I'm not gonna belabor that too much here, but head over to joinphenom.com and you can get started today. Also, if you have players in your network that you could onboard to Phenom, they have great incentive structures where you could earn tokens in the form of ownership for doing that. So if you want to become an agent, there's a link in the description. You can apply and I'll get you set up with that as well. But without further ado, let's dive into today's video. So there are two ways to improve at poker, and I always tell my clients this. You can be better at playing the game of poker, which is the strategy, game theory, ranges, math, etc. Or you can be a better poker player, which are the intangibles: mindset, bankroll management, tilt control, mental game, focus, discipline, routine, bankroll management, etc. So the first three tips, I'm going to focus on the latter, and the rest of them are going to be strategy based. So it's going to be a holistic video here. So without further ado, let's dive in. Tip number 10 is bankroll management. You can be the best player in the world, but if you don't manage your capital correctly, you will lose. And this is really important in online poker because the edges are smaller and therefore the variance is greater, meaning you need more buy-ins to play the same equivalent game. So if you're playing 5-10 live, you can maybe get away with 25 buy-ins, 20 buy-ins if you are choosing your games correctly, if you're game selecting well, and you have a low variance playing style. But online, you're gonna need a lot more than that. And if you're playing tournaments, you're gonna have to double or triple this for tournament poker because there's more variance in tournaments than there are in cash games. Now, I have other videos about this subject, and you can go to consciouspoker.com and look for the video and the tutorial about using a variance calculator to customize your bankroll management to your needs. Or you could go to our programs, click on Alec's Academy, and take our poker business course where I walk you through this. But either way, bankroll management is a super crucial step before you even sit down at the tables. Tip number 9 is the mindset, performance, and focus side of things. Now, in online poker, this is even more important than live poker because you see so many hands per hour that if you even go on 15-20 minute phase where you're tilting or you're off your A game, you could undo hours or a week of hard work just tilting off a couple buy-ins. And so it's really important to, first and foremost, create an environment that's conducive to playing online. I've had clients had success and improvement in their win rate simply by creating a space in their house that's dedicated to online poker. And where you are and how you act and how you bring yourself to the game is indicative of how you are intending to play. So if you dedicate a space to playing online, you sit properly, you sit up and you're focused in that environment, you're going to have better results. Also, if you meditate before the session or you get your mindset right, you work out, you eat healthy, you do the things that are conducive to being in a peak performance state before sitting down to play, and then also going with your intuition. I had a session the other day where I sat down to play and I was intending on playing in the afternoon, and I didn't feel like it just because my day didn't line up the way I wanted it to be ready to play. And you know what? I decided not to play because I found in my career it's a lot about the quality of your play more than the quantity. And so always being at your A game before you even sit down and being able to engineer that is hugely important. Tip number 8 is to review and study your play. What gets measured gets managed. Keep great, diligent records and review all of your hands with a very critical eye after each session before your next one. This way you're always ensuring that you're iterating and getting better before each session you play, and you're always doing something to improve. It's too easy and cheap to focus on the bad luck or the bad beats or the hands that you lost, but you really want to focus on what you can do better to improve your win rate. You can do this by using poker software and trackers, reviewing your hands. You can take a course, you can get coaching, you can talk with friends. We have a lot of awesome available tools and resources and coaching programs at consciouspoker.com. You could work with me or in a group coaching format. You can take one of our courses or just find something that works for you to actually make sure that before every session, you're reviewing at least 3 or 4 key hands, and then you're extrapolating the principles from those hands that you want to implement to change your game and improve for the better. Number 7, now we're going to dive into the strategy side of things. And the first tip I have for you is to play fewer hands. I think one of the biggest mistakes amateurs make is they just play too many hands. Now, this should almost feel boring. If you're bored playing, especially in live poker, but even online, you're probably doing something right. And that's because you're playing very, very tight. Depending on position and whether you're playing 6-max, 9-max tournaments or cash games or which stage of the tournament, you're going to want to play something around 20-25% of your hands, which is really not that many, especially because a lot of the percentage of those hands is going to be because you're in the later position or in the big blind. So from early position, you're playing super tight, and you want to be making sure that the vast majority of the hands that you're playing, you are the one initiating the action. So you're raising pre-flop, and you're almost, I would say you're never limping in. If you just immediately eliminated limping and you called a lot less often, you'd be in a lot better shape. Tip number 6, taking that one step further, is to call raises less and instead either fold or 3-bet, which is re-raise pre-flop, more often. So a lot of those hands that are in between borderline hands or you're not sure what to do, you should probably just be folding those hands. And when you have a decent playable hand, especially when you're in position, you're going to want to 3-bet that hand and re-raise pre-flop, because this does a couple things. Number 1, you have a chance of winning the pot immediately if your opponents fold. Number 2, you prevent someone else behind you from 3-betting and forcing you out of the pot. And number 3, even if you miss your hand post-flop, you now have the lead. So instead of your opponent c-betting and you having to fold if you miss, your opponent is going to check to you, you can c-bet, and they're the one on defense, they're out of position, and if they don't hit the flop, they're going to fold. So this is a great 1-2 tactic. 3-bet more often, call less often, follow it up with a c-bet post-flop, especially when you're in position, and that'll definitely help you improve your win rate. Tip number 5 is improve your hand reading. This is your ability to deductively reason through the hand and figure out what your opponents are holding. I teach a first principles, very simple but effective methodology called a hand range funnel. And the idea is that hand ranges follow the shape of a funnel. They start very wide pre-flop, and as the hand progresses, when you go to the flop, the turn, and the river, the funnel gets narrower and narrower, meaning there's fewer hands in your opponent's range that they could have. And I teach you exactly how to use this process. It's exactly what I use in every hand I play, taught to thousands of clients. It's available at consciouspoker.com. Enter your email. I'll send you over the hand range funnel and exactly how it works, so you can really take your hand reading to the next level and improve this core tactic. And it's going to apply in every format of poker you play, whether it's online, live, tournaments, or cash games. Being able to figure out the types of hands your opponent has and what their betting patterns mean and the types of ranges they have, whether they're strong or weak, is a great strategy. Once you do that, your counter strategy becomes pretty obvious and a lot easier to implement, because if you know they're weak, you should be calling. If you know they're weak, you should be bluffing. If you know they're strong, you should be folding, etc. So improve your hand reading and watch your game go to the next level. All right, number 4 is an overbet. You're seeing this happen more frequently as poker becomes more aggressive and solvers are implementing this strategy a lot more. Overbetting simply means to bet more than the size of the pot. When I first started playing poker, this was almost never seen. There was a couple guys that were doing this online in the games. They were seen as crazy wild and people thought they were out of their head. And now it's seen as like a common thing. And so if you're not, number 1, being able to understand how to play against overbets, and number 2, you're not implementing overbets yourself, you're definitely leaving money on the table. You're not maximizing your win rates. And ultimately, the problem with this is that it makes you a lot easier to play against. If your opponents know you're never going to overbet in a certain spot on the river, they might call you down more because they know they're not going to face a tough decision later on. It would be like being in a boxing match and knowing that the only punch your opponent has is a jab. If they're never going to right hook you and knock you the fuck out, I mean, you're not really that scared if they're going to jab you. You can do a lot more against them because you know they don't have a certain tool in their arsenal. And you want to have this tool in your arsenal, not only because it's effective in and of itself, but it's also more effective in other parts of the game tree and other aspects of your game that make you tougher to play against, that allow you to win more pots in other spots, because you have this tool in your arsenal. Now, you want to overbet in situations quite fundamentally when you can have a very strong hand based on how the hand was played, and your opponent is very unlikely to do that. Now, if you download the hand range funnel and you figure out which types of spots your opponent is likely to be strong or weak, it'll be easier to implement the overbet. But a typical example of this would be your opponent checks on the turn, and their range is what is called capped, meaning they never have a very, very strong hand, because if they did, they would have bet, whereas you would play all your strong hands the way that you played it, and now the river comes and it's your turn to overbet. So for example, let's say the flop comes Jack 10-4, you check call, turn comes a 7, it goes check, check, and the river comes a deuce. Well, you know that because your opponent checked the turn on a 7 on a Jack 10-4 7 board, they never have two pair, they never have a set, they never have a straight, whereas you check called the flop and you check the turn, you can definitely have two pair sets and straights. So when the river comes, it's a good opportunity for you to overbet, both with strong hands for value and some bluffs, to mix it up and keep your opponents guessing. Tip number 3 is to understand board texture. And this is really important because different board textures mean different things when your opponents are betting. So a King 7 deuce board is wildly different than a 9-8 6 board. And when your opponents are betting on King 7 deuce and then they double barrel on the turn, they're representing different types of hands than if they bet 9-8 6 and double barrel turn. And it depends on what the turn is on both of those board textures. So you need to understand, what are people representing? Which cards are considered scare cards? How do ranges change based on different cards that are coming? And how do you put your opponent on their hands based on these different types of board textures? And so it's really important to understand this nuance, because if you're just evaluating the strength of your hand and saying, well, on this board I have top pair and this board I have top pair. On some boards, top pair is a very strong hand, and on other boards, top pair is a mere bluff catcher. It's not a good hand at all. And you want to be mindful of these different board textures and how the strategies and change based on your opponent's betting frequencies. All right, tip number 2 is to balance your bet sizes. Now, you see this way too often with amateur players, that when they bet certain sizes or they bet certain amounts or they bet on certain cards, they always have one type of hand. And it's very easy to pinpoint what they have, and then people can develop simple counter strategies to exploit them. So you want to keep your opponents guessing by utilizing both small, medium, and large size, even over bets on various board textures with various strengths of hands. So sometimes, for example, when the flush card comes, you might want to make a very small bet and do that with a flush because your opponents won't put you on it. Remember that you make money by your opponents thinking you have the opposite of what you do. So if you play your hand in the way that your opponents expect you to play it, they're going to put you on that hand and you're not going to make much money. So if you use a small, weak bet when you're actually strong on a card that your opponents won't expect you to do it, that is a very effective strategy. And the same can be said for overbetting. When you overbet with a weak hand for value, but your opponents will expect you to only be overbetting with the nuts or nothing, and you actually have a hand that you're value betting, you can get paid off by them making a hero call when you're actually value betting with a medium strength hand. So you want to use this strategy to balance your bet size to level your opponents so that you could win more money against them. One final strategy on this is just consider leading into them or betting on cards that are good for your range that are bad for their range. So an example would be if the board comes 9-8-5, you check call, turn comes a king, you check call, and the river comes a 9. Well, on this board, it's a lot easier for you to have a 9 than it is for them because you check called twice, you have a lot of 9s in your range. They're betting the turn, they don't have that many 9s when the turn comes a king. I mean, sure, they could have a 9, maybe this isn't the exact quintessential example, but the idea and the first principle is that you want to be betting on boards where cards that come are good for you and bad for them, and you want to implement a betting strategy in conjunction with that. So the final tip number 1, I guess I'll leave this one for last because my favorite tip, is to really exploit your opposition. And I always tell my clients something very simple, but that's super effective. And that's, your goal is not to play on the highest level. It's to play one level higher than your opponents. So you want to understand what level your opponents are playing on, and then develop a strategy to play one level higher than them. You also want to understand how people generally play and notice betting patterns in online poker. There is something like a general consciousness of how people typically play, and different bet sizes over time come to mean different things because people are emulating other players, people are watching videos, people are watching other people play, and they start to emulate that. So there becomes this like sort of general consciousness of how people actually play. I remember when I first started playing online, when someone would check and then you would bet and they would min raise you, that meant they had a set. This was happening for a while, and this was like the default line that people took with a set. And it became this sort of thing until people figured out that everyone had a set when they did that, and then they started not doing that with a set. They started raising bigger or just check calling. So there's a way where the game is sort of evolving, and your job is to stay one step ahead of the curve and understand how people are playing, how bet sizes are interpreted, what they actually mean, and which lines are overbluffed or underbluffed, so you can develop a strategy to exploit people. So one thing, one basic way to understand this, and an example I'm talking about is understand that, if the board pairs the top card, people are bluffing less often on that board texture than they are if, a one-line straight gets there on the river or the flush card gets there or something like that. So there's certain types of boards where people's frequencies go up and down based on the texture, because that's just how people generally play. There's certain boards where people are overly aggressive and under aggressive, and you want to understand these exploits so that you can outplay your competition. If you want me to help you on your journey, head over to consciouspoker.com. You can enter your name and email anywhere, or click on programs. We have a bunch of programs and coaching, either with myself or group coaching, to help you on your journey. Really look forward to hearing your comments. I hope this video served you. Subscribe to this channel. There's more awesome content coming your way, and thanks for your attention. I'll see you guys in the next one.